Under the impulse of the French G8 presidency, the Deauville Partnership was launched in May 2011 to support political and economic transformation arising from the Arab revolutions. In addition to Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Turkey, 9 international and regional financial institutions joined the G8 members and transitioning partners to discuss the aftermath of the Arab Spring. On the table, $40 billion to accompany the establishment of democracy in Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, and Morocco, and level the field for an economic framework to support homegrown strategies for inclusive growth. The transitioning MENA countries are facing several pressing challenges: education, employment, economic growth, infrastructures. If the newborn democracies are to succeed, the governments have a duty to take those challenges up. Expectations are just as high as the hopes triggered by the revolutions. With some of the highest unemployment rates in the world, North African countries share one gaping shortcoming: their educational systems. Underfunded, ill-fitted to the job market, and with yawning deficits in primary education and high school dropouts, the educational system fails to form the thriving middle class that would carry the countries on the path to prosperity. The time is ripe for a new Mediterranean partnership. The area needs a global approach to foster all energies and put them to good use. Building on its successful experience in Eastern Europe, the European Development and Reconstruction Bank is redeploying its operations toward the Mediterranean. The European Investment Bank, as Europe's financial arms for the Mediterranean, has concurrently a fundamental role to play by providing financial assistance to transitioning countries. In the short run, the challenge will be to bring back macroeconomic balance and prevent tremendous expectations to drive transitioning countries into unsustainable budgetary situations. By giving in to vocal social demands, Morocco's budget has been put under strain since the beginning of 2011. Egypt and Tunisia have seen their growth come to a halt, while their payment balances have been rapidly deteriorating under the constant pressure of plummeting trade and tourism. In the long run, financial support needs to back the economic upgrading, the development of human capital and skills, and to foster investment and regional integration. The assistance effort to transitioning countries raises yet another question: the one of aid effectiveness. In 50 years, no less than $3,000 billion have been dedicated to development assistance. Yet, in most of Africa, South and Eastern Asia, poverty in all its forms continues to be a major issue. 22,000 children die of poverty each and every day. Despite the warnings, famines continue to strike the African continent just like 20 years ago. By the current trend, the target set by the MDGs to halve the proportion of underweight children will be missed by 30 million in Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. After capacity building and structural adjustment, have we changed the way we think about development assistance? A panel discussion following this session will aim to tackle this issue.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this plenary session. I'm glad we had this video because it really saves us a lot of time, gets us going to our discussion right away. My name is Octavia Nasser. I will be moderating this panel of distinguished guests. I had the pleasure of meeting each and every one of them today. Distinguished is really an understatement. They are going to talk to us about things that usually are dry, things that people tend to stay away from, and yet their experience and their know-how is going to make the discussion very interesting, I'm sure. Something new that we're going to be doing in this panel is opening the floor to your questions. So if you do have a question, if you know you have a question now, make sure that one of the organizers sees you and recognizes you as someone with a question, at some point I will turn to the audience and ask questions. Please feel free to ask any questions to any of the panelists or to all of them. Make your questions short. Let us know who you are. And we'll try to answer your questions as best as possible. Let me thank the Amadeus Institute for this opportunity. I was lucky to be here last year. And anyone who was here last year or can only imagine that it seemed like a different world last year, only 12 months ago. We were talking about challenges, and we were talking about change and how change will come about. Some of us were hopeful. I know that. I've always been hopeful about this region. Some of us were not. And we all debated, we all discussed. We talked about the role of the youth in bringing change to the Middle East. We talked about the need for change in the Middle East. We talked about the importance of social media. Although some people had no knowledge of social media or no appreciation for social media. It's amazing what 1 year can do to you, isn't it? So I'm very pleased to be here today discussing issues that are of prime importance, because no matter what you call it, what we've seen in the past year in the Middle East, whether you call it uprising, whether you call it revolution, whether you call it a transition or a process, whatever the name that you give it, you have to admit that it is historic. And it is a big responsibility that we should not, and I know most of us are not taking lightly. We take it very seriously. And today what we're going to be talking about is what happens next. So, okay, we removed governments, people revolted, people took to the streets, people brought down governments, leaders were removed from power, some fought, others left, ran away. Still ongoing issues, the Middle East is still boiling with issues, we're not done. Even those that removed their presidents or their leaders, such as Egypt, they're now dealing with the new challenges of SCAF, the military. How is this gonna fan out? How is Tunisia gonna fan out? And in the middle of all this, finances. Can we ever move forward without a financial plan? Can anyone stand on their feet? Individuals, groups, families, countries, nations, continents, the world. Can we move forward without a financial stability, without investments, attracting investments, dealing with them properly? This is what our panel will be talking about. As I thanked Amadeus Institute, I want to thank one person in particular, Soraya bin Sheba. Where is she? She's been my boss, I have to say, for the last a few weeks. She organized this panel, and I think she did an awesome job with that, because this is one panel that was very, very hard to put together. If you look at your program, you're going to see many names that are not up here today. And I will let you guess why these panelists are not with us. Also, we gained other speakers who are just phenomenal, to the point that earlier today we were saying this panel is going to be even much better than the planned one, and all thanks go to Soraya for that. Thank you, Soraya, for organizing this. Without further ado, let me introduce my distinguished guests. I'm going to start to my left, Nono Matondo Fundani. He is the regional director of the African Development Bank. And before that, now he serves in Tunisia. Before that, he served in Morocco for also the African Development Bank. He was a country manager, so he does bring to the table a very unique perspective on the African experience and how Tunisia and Morocco can help move the Middle East forward. My next distinguished guest is Jan Fischer. You might have recognized him from TV or newspapers, because he served as the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic when the Czech Republic was going through crisis. Well, guess what? This is one topic that we need to talk about: governance under crisis and governance in transition. So Jan today is the Vice President for Operational Policies of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So on top of his duties today, we will be talking a little bit about the past, the political experience, and what the Middle East can learn from that experience to move itself forward. Last, but certainly not least, Marc Juvet, associate at Bourdieu Bank in Switzerland. His specialization is private investing. And this is an area that is very, very important for the Middle East. How is the Middle East going to attract those private investors from within their own communities and from elsewhere? We're going to be drawing on that as well. One plug I'd like to make, just because the cause is very, very close to my heart. Michel wrote a book called Même le ciel ne pleure plus, even the sky doesn't cry anymore. This is about violence, sexual violence against women in some parts of Africa. I invite everyone to get the book or read a little bit on Michel's website, and of course he can talk to you about it after the panel. So I'm going to start the first question. Please let us know if you have questions so we can prepare for that when we get to that point. I do want to start with Jan, and I want to talk about governance. You've been through this. You're watching a Middle East that is in turmoil. It depends from one country to another. Tell us, from your experience, what we should understand from this and how can the Middle East move forward?
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes, it works. It does work. So thank you very much for inviting me. That's a pleasure for me to be here at this very prestigious event. By the way, that's the first time when my institution, the EBRD, is joining this meeting. That's something symbolical because we are somewhere in the very beginning of our engagement in this region, including Morocco as our shareholder so far and potential country of operation. So that's very nice. I'm very happy to be seated here with so distinguished colleagues and panelists. Thank you once more. So your question was the governance and my experience anyway. So before I start with this, so several times and many times I have been asked as a person who comes from the transition country, or former transition country, what are the similarities and what are the dissimilarities of the processes which we have exercised in the end of 80s when the communism broke up and Arab Spring? There is a lot of similarities, but a lot of dissimilarities, and about both we can talk 3-4 days, weeks, months, but it's not a case of this panel. So just very quickly, that's very nice. The first thing, speaking about similarities and dissimilarities, this similarity is clearly in the fact that that's the different what we are marching from. The former communist countries were based on the one leading party system, Soviet Union behind shoulders, and so on and so forth. That's not a case here, but similarity is what we are striving to. Market-driven economy, less state control, less state ownership, less regulation from the side of the state, well-performing finance and banking sector, attention driven to the small and medium enterprises, care for labor situation at the labor market, and of course, development of the enhancing the role of the parliamentary democracy and multi-party system. That's something which is very similar. Now going back to the transition and what's my experience? The first thing, it cannot be reduced just to the economic issues. That's a very multidimensional process. Change of legislation, legal system, institutions, better performing of the administration, of civil service. Building up of the investment in a new investment and better investment climate, business environment, and to strive to you see, the democracy doesn't mean only voting in parliament and the party-based political system. That's democracy. It's something much, much broader, much, much broader. This is building up, and it goes slowly. And actually what we call the civil society, with fully developed role of non-governmental organization, civil society organization, based on the permanent and regular dialogue between these corners of the society, non-governmental actors, dialogue with the establishment. This is something which belongs to the democracy, and which doesn't mean the formally organized political system, which is the precondition, but which is not end of the story. The second, another finding from transition, from the very beginning phases of transition, is the fact that expectations are extremely high at the very beginning. And then comes the realistic assessment, and then possibly frustration. When we celebrated in my country, and it was in the time when I served as the Prime Minister, we celebrated 20 years of what we called Velvet Revolution in Prague. And I was facing such a lot of disappointed people and even frustrated people. We expected that we would be there and there. My clear answer was, dear guys and lovely ladies, look around you. Look around you. What has happened anyway, which is very positive, but behind the expectations that we have at the very beginning. Crisis anyway, which I was facing as the Prime Minister, and which is possibly knocked at the door once again. That's a very strong issue, and what you have to develop is the very good dialogue, not among politicians, but between establishment and the nation and the people, to communicate them all the measures which are sometimes very strong, very inconvenient, very uncomfortable. That's the point. The people have to understand what the government actually does and what is going to do. And sometimes it's very painful. Any reforms have been very painful. And when crisis came, it was much worse. So what I'm saying, the most important thing, that's the building up the communication bridges somewhere between establishment and the society. Otherwise, if you are arrogant, if you think that you know everything, that you are used to talk and not to listen to, that's the beginning of very bad troubles. So that was in the introduction. Later on about my new employer anyway. So.
Very much, Jan. That's very, very interesting. Before I turn to Nono to talk about initiatives and what countries and regions can do to help, I want Mark to try and explain to us, based on what Jan just said, if you are to consult one of those new governments, one of those new countries, what are 3 things that you would say they absolutely must have and they must do before they start attracting private investment?
Je parlerai en français et mon prénom c'est Michel, pas Marc. Donc, je vais vous donner un peu quelques exemples d'expérience, puisque j'ai commencé ma carrière sur les marchés asiatiques dans les années 80, qui étaient confrontés pas tellement aux mêmes problématiques, puisqu'il n'y avait pas des problématiques de politique et de démocratie, mais plutôt des problématiques de développement économique et d'attraction des investissements étrangers, puisque, on le sait, un des moteurs de la croissance vient essentiellement de ces investissements étrangers et des flux de capitaux. Alors, l'expérience asiatique est très intéressante parce qu'ils ont réussi à accumuler beaucoup de choses, et en particulier, pour être simple, ils ont réussi à montrer ce qu'ils faisaient. Et je crois que tout gouvernement ou tout État qui est en train de se reconstruire doit pratiquer une politique de communication vers le reste du monde qui soit la plus transparente et la plus objective possible. Pour un investisseur privé, il est toujours évidemment très embêtant d'avoir un discours qui dit quelque chose et ensuite qui se confronte à une réalité qui est différente. Donc la meilleure façon d'attirer les investissements, c'est d'abord effectivement d'avoir des gouvernements en place qui parlent juste et qui disent ce qu'ils font dans la plus grande des transparences.